And welcome back to Crosstalk, where today an interesting topic, this issue of biometrics, our freedom, our body is our ID, and of course we're talking about facial recognition scans, and you'd be surprised where information on you will show up. In some cases, all they need to know is what the year you were born, and if you've ever been in a hospital, is say date of birth, and you whip out with that, and they can come up with your identity in practically a moment of time. This issue of identity, we're talking about security. Of course, identity theft is a big issue as well. But Mark Lerner, our guest, is the author of this new book entitled Your Body is Your I.D., a new book out this week. And it's available across the country. And, of course, you have a phone number again, Mark. Why don't you share that with us?
Yes, if people would like to reach, rather than the phone number, because what happens is people call and call and call. We
Sure.
got a phone number last year, and literally we got, if people can believe this, over 1 million calls.
Oh, my goodness.
So what we ask people to do is please go to the constitutionalalliance.org website, and on the left-hand side, there's a place for people to contact us. All they have to do is click on it. Of course, we want them to order the book and DVD, but we have many pastors that have asked me to go all over the country and speak at their churches because many people believe we are in the end times. And as you and I were saying during the break, when it came to biblical prophecy being fulfilled about Israel, really, up until the time it happened, most people didn't see that or believe it would happen, but it did, and biblical prophecy was fulfilled. When you talk about Revelation 13, 16, 17, and 18, it's a process. It begins with enrollment, all people. And we can document beyond anybody's, any doubt that this process applying to all people, a system of financial control and identification, has already begun. And that nobody is denying, whether it's people in our government or other governments, that this is exactly what they want, a system of global identification and financial control. And to the point that Julian Ashburn, who is the head of the International Biometrics Association, it's a global biometrics agency, has said this is the only way that governments can have absolute power. Well, I'm sorry, I'm a U.S. citizen. I believe in sovereignty. I don't want our government to be part of a global biometrics agency that believes that there ought to be absolute power.
We're going to go back to our phone lines, which have literally jammed, and we only have just a few moments remaining. So I wish many more of you had called earlier. We're going to go right now to Patty in New London, Wisconsin. Patty, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks, Vic. I have a question. In referencing the Book of Revelation, would the guest be able to comment on whether or not we will have a choice of receiving this mark or not?
Well, you do, and that's an excellent question. Look, in Scripture, it's clear that this is a system that God condemns. Now, I leave it up to each Christian to decide in good conscience if what we provide is sound foundation to resist being in this system. But if you go back to Corinthians, we know that God does provide a way to escape. And yes, you will have the opportunity. But understand, by the time you get to the point that the mark of the beast is already being, if you will, introduced, and people are being told they have to have it in order to be able to basically survive, at that point, okay, yeah, you can walk away, nullification, and say, I'm not going to do it, but then you better be able to survive on your own. The real key for Christians, and as I talk to pastors, and we talk about being the watchman on the tower, you don't want to get to that point as a Christian. What you want to do is stop the enrollment process from taking place. And to that end, we write legislation, and we've had legislation passed and signed into law, A, that gets rid of Real ID in terms of the states. B, it removes your Social Security number from a DMV database within 72 hours after you originally supplied it. 72 hours later, it's taken out. But to your question is this. We also have religious biometric exemption legislation that states as a constitutional right, the First Amendment, Christians have a right not to be enrolled into this global system of identification. Last year, for the first time, we introduced it. We had it pass in one chamber of the Oklahoma legislature, basically 40-something to 5 or 10. We had the votes in the House. The lobbyists for the biometrics industry started acting like vultures over the legislature until they could force the Speaker of the House not to allow the bill to be heard in the House, even though we had the votes. So we're working with lawmakers this year in Oklahoma and other states to ensure this kind of legislation will be heard. And we have the support of many, not just ministries, but groups and organizations on the left and the right for this legislation. Two pieces, one for Christians, religious exemption, and also we have legislation that would apply to all citizens, because it does apply to all citizens when you start creating a surveillance society.
Mitch, make that Rich in Menominee Falls. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, thank you very much. My question is probably similar, and if I don't want to take the real ID, I live on Social Security, and how would Christians survive if they're not able to, have any money?
Well, and that's a good point. Here's the answer. When we first started opposing real ID, people thought we were crazy. The idea that the states were going to stand up to the federal government sufficiently in enough numbers to prevent the federal government from implementing a program, people told me I was crazy. And then when we talked about the ACLU and ACLJ coming together, they told me we were crazy again. But the fact is, now half the states have said no to real ID. You'd have a hard time finding a federal law where half the states have said no and prevented the federal government from implementing a system. I would beg, I pray to God that Christians that hear this and non-Christians will go to our website, because it's hard as an individual to have the impact, but our organization has a proven track record of success. So if everybody goes there, orders the book and DVD, we will do the work.
Mark Lerner, thank you so much for being with us today. Interesting program. And again, your website?
constitutionalalliance.org, constitutionalalliance.org, and they can email us through the contact button on the left-hand side.
Thank you so much for being our guest today. And thanks for joining us.
Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from BCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a cassette or CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.